The Young and the Restless spoilers Monday, full December 16, 2024. In the private lounge of the Grand Phoenix Hotel, the early afternoon sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a soft glow across the plush sofas and glass coffee tables. Billy leaned back, his mind still reeling from the kiss he'd shared with Sally only a few hours before. It played over and over in his head, the way she had looked at him, the warmth of her hand against his jaw, the gentle but lingering brush of her lips against his. To him, that kiss had felt like proof that what they shared was real, that despite every piece of evidence suggesting they were an ill-matched pair, there was genuine love coursing beneath the surface. He wanted to believe it was love, needed to believe it, even as he knew there were complications they had yet to unravel. Sally, meanwhile, stood just outside the doorway of the main hall. She could see Billy from a distance, the slope of his shoulders, the tentative smile drifting in and out of existence on his lips. She knew he was probably thinking about their earlier moment of closeness, spinning daydreams of a future she couldn't quite picture. For her, the kiss had been laden with conflicting emotions. Yes, there had been passion, she couldn't deny that. A surge of feeling had taken hold when their mouths met, a sense of comfort and connection that belied their messy history. But as exhilarating as that moment was, it also felt like a promise she might not be able to keep. Sally had been debating how and when to break things off, and the kiss only made that decision more painful. She feared that giving in to their attraction again and again would only make it harder to tell him the truth, that she might not be as invested as he was, that her heart was teetering between affection and uncertainty. She couldn't deny the importance of what they shared. After all, Billy wasn't just some passing fling. Yet the timing was never right, and each time she resolved to end it, the words clung stubbornly to the back of her throat. Across town, Jill Abbott sat in her study, the late afternoon shadows growing long on the antique desk where she once conducted business with a fierce pride. Now, that pride was tempered by regret. She stared at old photographs of Chancellor Industries, back when it was Chancellor Abbott Industries, before she had sold it to Victor Newman. It seemed like a sound financial decision at the time, a strategic move to free up capital and redirect her focus. But the cost had been far greater than she imagined. She had lost something intangible, the legacy and respect that came from holding on to the family's prized enterprise. Jill had also lost a vital connection with her son, Billy. Their relationship had already been strained by disagreements and unhealed wounds of the past, but this decision to sell had driven a wedge between them that felt final. Billy's respect for her had vanished. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in his clipped tone whenever they briefly spoke. He no longer saw in her a mentor or a guardian of the family's honor. Instead, she had become a symbol of betrayal and disappointment. He had barely looked at her since. Money was all she had left, money and a hollow victory that tasted of ashes. Now, Jill realized, no amount of wealth could buy back her son's esteem or undo the damage the sale had caused. It was a bitter lesson learned too late. In a quieter part of Genoa City, Nate Hastings waited by the window of his own apartment, anxiety gnawing at him. He was expecting someone, his alleged half-brother. The story was complicated, as family matters so often were. Rumors and revelations had surfaced, suggesting that the man coming to town was his sibling, sharing a father Nate had never fully understood. The first thing Nate planned to do, once they were face to face, was demand a DNA test. He was no stranger to complicated family entanglements, and he refused to invest emotionally in a relationship that might be built on falsehoods. He needed proof, scientific confirmation that the man who claimed to be his brother really was who he said he was. Yet Nate's well-laid plans were already being threatened by Amy, a woman whose motivations were as murky as the city's backroom deals. Amy had been hovering at the periphery of Nate's life for weeks now, always seeming to pop up at the most inconvenient times, asking probing questions, dropping cryptic hints. Something about her demeanor made him wary. She had connections, resources, and a knack for steering conversations away from what mattered most. Nate suspected that she wanted to distract him from the DNA test, to keep him from pursuing the truth about this potential brother. If he was too busy putting out fires Amy started, he might not have the time or energy to confirm his suspicions. And that, apparently, was exactly what she wanted. Back at the Grand Phoenix, Billy finally caught Sally's eye. She stepped into the lounge, her posture guarded, her expression uncertain. He greeted her with a gentle smile and an earnestness that pricked her conscience. He deserved honesty, he deserved to know where he stood. Yet, as he reached for her hand, Sally could feel the tug of her conflicting desires. Part of her wanted to surrender to the warmth of his affection, to let his belief in their love carry them both forward. Another part of her knew that this was a bubble of comfort that needed bursting before it grew too large to contain. Billy spoke first, his voice low and hopeful. "That kiss, it meant a lot to me," he said, studying her face. "I know things between us have been unclear. But I want to believe that what we have is worth fighting for. I want to believe it's real." Sally swallowed hard, her heart beating faster. She opened her mouth, intending to tell him the truth. That she was unsure, that the timing was off, that maybe they were both clinging to an idea that wouldn't survive the scrutiny of reality. But the words failed her, catching in her throat. The silence stretched between them, heavy and expectant, until she finally managed a weak smile. "Billy," she began slowly, "I know how you feel, and I don't want to hurt you. I need time." Across the room, hidden from view, Jill had stepped into the lounge. She hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but she caught a few words between her son and Sally. Seeing Billy this way, vulnerable, hopeful, made her chest tighten with regret. She recalled a younger version of him, a boy who trusted her, looked up to her. Now, he was on his own path, searching for love or at least some form of meaning that Jill had failed to provide. The decision to sell Chancellor Abbott had not only affected her reputation with Billy, it had seemingly cut off any channel of honest conversation. She watched him for a moment, feeling the sting of what she'd lost. She considered approaching him, apologizing or explaining herself, but fear got the better of her. What could she say that wouldn't sound hollow? Money had filled her pockets but emptied her life of one of its most precious connections. Meanwhile, Nate's apartment was growing quiet as the sun sank behind the city skyline. He paced the hardwood floors, glancing every so often at the door. The man claiming to be his brother was due soon, and Nate's mind swirled with questions. Would he have their father's eyes? Would he carry the same mannerisms, the same habits? Would the DNA test Nate insisted on shatter this newfound connection or confirm it? And what about Amy's meddling? Would she come barging in with some cleverly orchestrated distraction just as he was about to get his samples taken? He thought about the value of family, of certainty, of knowing one's origins. In a town where fortunes rose and fell at the flick of a pen, and where trust could be bought and sold as easily as stock shares, something as fundamental as blood ties felt incredibly important. If this man truly was his half-brother, Nate wanted to build something genuine with him. If not, better to know now, before any false bonds had a chance to grow. Unbeknownst to Nate, Amy was already 2 steps ahead. She stood in the hallway, just out of sight, her cell phone in hand. She was busy ensuring that a certain courier would arrive late, that a set of medical records would be misfiled, that a simple DNA test kit wouldn't reach Nate's apartment in time. Every distraction she orchestrated was deliberate, aimed at pulling Nate's focus away from the truth and towards more pressing, if artificial, crises. Maybe she had her own reasons, perhaps it suited her employer's agenda, or maybe she personally stood to gain from keeping Nate in the dark. As the evening advanced, Genoa City's inhabitants wrestled with the invisible threads binding their fates together. Billy and Sally hovered at a crossroads, uncertain whether their kiss represented authentic love or a mirage born of loneliness and confusion. Sally, still clinging to silence, wondered if honesty would break them apart or set them free. Billy, hopelessly optimistic, wanted to believe that the tenderness he'd felt in that moment was proof enough of what they shared. Jill, haunted by the consequences of her choices, silently wished she could buy back the respect she had lost, if only she knew how. And Nate, on the cusp of a revelation, stood ready to confirm or deny a brotherly bond, if only Amy's machinations wouldn't pull him off course. In the background, Victor Newman's influence still permeated the city, his acquisition of Chancellor Abbott continuing to ripple outward, affecting lives he barely considered. legacies and loyalties were never static in this place. Yet it was not the money or the power plays that defined these characters. Instead, it was the delicate balancing act of hearts and minds, the struggle to discern truth from illusion, love from infatuation, and family from strangers wearing a familiar face. The night would bring more questions, perhaps a few answers, and almost certainly new complications. Such was the nature of their tangled affairs. The kiss had sparked a quiet reckoning in Billy's and Sally's hearts. Jill's regret simmered, threatening to boil over. Nate's apprehension hovered on the edge of confrontation. And Amy's secret interventions ensured that clarity would not come easily. In a city built on secrets and second chances, everyone's next move mattered, perhaps more than they would ever know.